So again, the textbook is a free PDF for download under Canvas files, small-groups.pdf. And we're going to be going through chapter 1 today. We'll see if we can finish or get into chapter 2 as well. So here we go. So communicating in small groups, the principles and practices. It's the updated 11th edition, and this is for EVC COMS 045, and this is Professor Lee. Okay. So chapter 1 is about group principles and practices. So learning objectives. So 1.1, we're going to define small group communication, understand what the boundaries are, the parameters, and I'm going to go from there. 1.2, we'll list the 4 characteristics that distinguish a team from a group. So we'll learn that all teams are groups, but not all groups are actually teams, right? Teams are kind of a much more developed type of group. 1.3, we'll describe the advantages and disadvantages of working with others in groups and teams. And 1.4, we'll compare and contrast primary and secondary groups, learn what they are. 1.5, describe virtual communication methods. We're talking about using technology and the internet, and we're using virtual communication methods now in the Zoom meeting. Name the, well, and 1.6, we'll name the 2 essential qualities of competent group members. So as a group member, you want to bring these 2 essential qualities to your group, and then everybody else in your group should be doing that as well, and then you can be really, really successful. But you're going to learn in this class that some people may be poor group members. When you get like family, you don't get to really choose your family members either. Friends, you kind of choose. Mostly work, you don't choose at all, really. But by hiring and firing people, they get rid of all the poor group members usually for the most part, depending on what kind of job you have and who you work for too. So, which is the advantages of getting your college degree. And I think one of the things that people underestimate is when you get a college degree, you get jobs where you work with other people who have college degrees. And you're going to find that, I think, especially when you're working in a group, that's really good. That's just, you know, they're responsible, they're kind of proven, and they've got some achievements and accomplishments under their belt too, right? So, okay. So let's move into the beginning of chapter 1. So human beings, us, we're creatures who collaborate. So collaborate is a word that means that we work together, right? In fact, like collaboration with the enemy in a time of war will get you killed because you're now like you're a traitor because you're collaborating with the enemy, you're working with the enemy, right? So but collaboration, if there's no enemy, is just really, really working together for a common goal. So we need to establish relationships with others because we want to work together, right? So before you can work with people, you got to have a relationship with them, right? Learn who they are, their name, figure out like kind of what your strengths and weaknesses are, how you can work together and really, really be more successful and create what we call synergy and cohesion. So, and we're raised in family groups, right? That's the first thing that we enter the world. We're in a group, right? We got mom, dad, maybe some siblings, and then a multi-generational other members of your family. So we are educated and entertained in groups, and we work and worship in groups. So if you think about it, groups are pretty fundamental. Human beings are like wolves. We're pack animals. The lone wolf dies, the pack survives. And that's something that I think you want to take away from this class is, yeah, I need to be part of a group and socially, at work, at school, and then the different hobbies, clubs, and other activities that I do. I have different, groups that I connect with, and that these are really, really important to be making you who you want to become. So connections today can be virtual and online. COVID-19 has actually spurred work from home and distance learning, and group work and communication is actually difficult though. Getting people to work together is really, really, really hard. Inequitable, which means not fair, and it's time consuming. But learning these skills will enable you to succeed because in the world, we need to work with other people, right? Even though it's difficult, inequitable, and time consuming. You can do things in groups of people that you can never do by yourself. So even though group work can be hard and difficult, the results make things happen that you just by yourself, you can never, it's like moving, a giant sofa. No matter what you do, you can never move it by yourself, right? It's too heavy, too big. With 2 or 3 people, you can now move that sofa, right? So small group communication, what we call SGC, is defined as communication among a small group of people who share a common purpose, who feel a sense of belonging to the group, and who exert influence on one another. So we have a definition here. We talked about in 1.1, we want to define small group communication. So here it is, right? You have a group of people who share a common purpose, who feel a sense of belonging to the group, and who exert influence on one another. So they all influence each other. So let's ask ourselves, what is communication? Okay, so communication is the process of making sense out of the world and sharing that sense with others by creating meaning through the use of verbal and nonverbal messages, right? So we communicate and create relationships by using these words, languages, and then thoughts, expressions, hand gestures, movements, facial expressions. And these are why we need to put yourself on camera and communicate all your verbal and nonverbal messaging to the group and to the world, to the people that we want to communicate with. So communication is about making sense of our experiences, people, and their messages. It's about sharing sense. You know, like, did you like that song? I did. You know, when you hear a new song from a new band or a new album from the band, you know, your first single comes out and you're like, okay, yeah, that was good, or that was whatever, right? So Taylor Swift album just recently came out, right? Anybody check it out? You can type your answer in the chat just if you have a comment or not. But I know, I think my daughter mentioned it or something because YouTube did something about it and stuff. She's maybe she's one of the top 2 or 3 entertainer singers in the world right now, I think. So it's all about creating meaning, you know, like XXXOOO, I love you, hugs and kisses. And that's, you know, how does XXXOOO mean hugs and kisses, by the way? It's kind of interesting, right? So we create meaning from even symbols such as alphabetical alphabet characters. Then we have verbal and nonverbal communication. I'm going to ask the question, you know, do actions speak louder than words? And a lot of people think so, which is why your gesturing, your expressions, facial expressions, your movement are maybe more important than actual words that you're saying. And the other quote you got to remember there about is that's not what you say. It's not what you say. It's how you say it, right? It's how you say it that matters. So I love you versus I love you, right? There's a big difference in that. So a symbol is something that represents a thought, concept, object, or experience. We have the X, you know, what does that mean? It means X marks the spot. Do you all know that X is a legal signature? So when you're signing documents and your financial aid stuff or contracts with your phone company, if you don't have a signature, you can just type the X. And the history behind that is that in the old days, some people were illiterate. They didn't know how to write, so they couldn't write their signature. So they always accepted a big X as that's what I'm going to do instead of writing my name because I don't know how to write. So, okay. A symbol is something that represents a thought, concept, object, or experience. And so you can also have like the eye in the pyramid, like the Illuminati thing, right? And that represents like a group of people that you might secret society that you belong to. And so symbols is we'll talk about this a lot more, but there are a lot of them out there and we use them a lot. And you can create your own symbol, right? Like if you're branding your own clothing company, like a t-shirt, I might do a giant P with like a backward P or something like that, right? Or I don't know how you do that. So, and so that would be an example of how I would just create my own symbol. So human communication is transactional, meaning that when we communicate, we send and receive messages simultaneously. Thus, we cannot not communicate. So, right. So if you nod off during a meeting, right, you're communicating disinterest or lack of focus that you're really tired or you're unprepared for work, right? So we say that human communication is transaction. There's many interactions going on. And again, it's simultaneously just, you know, I wave, you wave back, and things of that nature. So key elements of communication include the source, message, receiver, and the channel. So what's the source? It's the source of the message. It's the originator of the ideas and feelings expressed. So in this case, I'm the source of the chapter 1 lecture we're using the slideshow to cover. And does everybody remember you have access to this slideshow as well? It's linked under Canvas discussions under I think it was lecture Q&A was the head of the discussion. So, and then the message is the information being communicated, the words, the thoughts, the look, the gesture, and what I'm wearing too. I mean, like think about what does it communicate that I'm wearing a hat, a windbreaker, insulated jacket, and then I have a shirt and a long sleeve on underneath. Yeah, you know that basically I'm cold, right? And that's because the temperature here in Lake Tahoe right now in the mornings is freezing. It's when I wake up and turn on my car, the car is like, oh, there's ice on the road, you know, be careful. And then it turns on all the seed eaters and everything just because it's like that. Yeah, that's actually good, by the way. I like cars that have all the heating elements. The electric car is a drag though, because it has all those things, but it uses the battery instead of the thermal heat from the combustion engine that you're using. Okay. The receiver is the person receiving the message. And that would you be the audience, right? And you have to interpret the words and the actions and the things that I do. And then finally, the channel is the means by which the message is expressed to the receiver. So there are 5 channels because they reflect the 5 senses. So when I'm communicating, if I wave at you, if you see me wave, we're using the sense of sight. So that's the channel sight. And if I just grab something. If let's do a virtual fist bump, right? Boom. That'll be the channel of touch. Hearing is, yes, you can hear me speak. You shall succeed in small group communication, right? And that'll be the channel of hearing or audio. And then I have a cup of coffee brewing. I'm gonna go grab it in a second, but I'm gonna bring it over here and give me a second. All right. Sorry, I'm back here. Go. So I just want to show you that I'm Asian, so I'm Korean American. So although I'm hella whitewashed, but anyhow, I got chopsticks and I use them to stir my coffee because that way I don't have to throw away the little plastic things. And that's kind of my little Asian culture fusion thing with my coffee. Okay, so if you smell the coffee, that's the channel of smell. And if I ask you to drink coffee, that would be the channel of taste. So good sources will use all channels, right? All 5 channels. A lot of people just use 2, right? They use hearing and sight as speakers. But I think good speakers always try to include taste, touch, smell whenever they can to bring in the additional channels. All right, so mediated setting in which the channel of the communication is a phone line, fiber optic cable, wireless signal, the internet, or other means of sending message to others, and the interaction is not face-to-face. So we have a 6th channel here, and that's sort of what we call the digital world. But I'm going to make the argument that if you're on camera, you're seeing the person and you're hearing them. So it's using sight and audio hearing, but you're just using technology because we're not in the same place to talk, right? But the communication allows us to have face-to-face interaction via the interaction. We just can't do taste, touch, smell unless we coordinate that, like virtual touch. We all get a cup of coffee so we can taste it and smell it, right? And communication is integral to small group and team success. Integral means it's like not just important, but it's a necessity, right? And without it, you're not going to have any kind of teams or group success. So for example, if you want to stay married, studies suggest good communication in the relationship makes for strong marriages. So whoever your partner is, talk to them, and verbally and non-verbally. I always say phone over texts all the time, 100% of the time. I would tell you meeting face to face and talking about your feelings, your priorities in life. And my good example might be just, I am not really religious and I don't go to church anymore. My parents are super Christians and I was raised in the Christian church, but I don't take my kids to church and I don't talk about God. And I still occasionally do notice I pray before I eat still. And I could quote you 50 verses from the Bible because I have them all memorized, including the Lord's Prayer, just because I did so much of that. But what I've noticed is with my children's mother, she's super atheist. And so I was like, who cares? I'm not, I don't really care about it. But when we were raising our children, sometimes the kids would go to church and mommy was actually oppositional to that. Whereas I was like, I don't support it. Like, it doesn't have to happen, but it's not a bad thing at all for the kids to go to church sometimes. And so we had this huge disagreement there. It was really interesting how about if we communicated about that better, that wouldn't become a conflict later on. So, all right. So that's just my example. So yeah, communicate with your partners a lot, all the time about everything. You should feel comfortable asking your partners and talking about whatever it might be, right? Okay. 1.12, let's talk about a small group of people. So let's go to the other side. So 2 people is a dyad or a couple. So that's not a group. What we really find out is a group is 3 or more person, right? Because when you have 2 people and then you add a third, the dynamic changes everything, right? They always say, odds, what's the saying about couples? Odd numbers are bad, right? Because it's actually true. If you have a group of people, even numbers is great because everyone tends to pair up a lot, right? And so just there you go. But adding a third person just changes everything. So the maximum size of a group is maybe 12 to 20. Right, too big is bad. Like, it becomes cumbersome. Just too, like, has anybody ever gone to a party with like 30 people instead of just like 5? Like, not total but you're bringing a group of people to the party, and you just can't manage that group, that big of a group, right? So keep your group small. And smaller groups are better, and the members tend to become passive in larger settings. When you have too many groups, too many members in a group, some of them will become very passive because there's so many people there, right? So they tune out. So we need a group is basically 3 or more people, 3 or more, and I would say try to keep it under 20. Because once you have 20 people or more, you're not a group, you're kind of a mob, or I don't even know what the right word is. So okay. Remember, look at sports teams. They tend to have 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, something like that, right? Football teams have like 56, a whole roster, but that's a little bit different. Okay, so groups have, number 1, a common purpose. Despite everyone's different motives, there is a common purpose. Like the Girl Scouts, I was going to say, Boy Scouts no longer exist. They're called Scouts, but Girl Scouts exists. Think about what's the purpose of the Girl Scouts: to like raise, foster self-esteem, and like, things for girls. All right. And then everybody else actually joins Girl Scouts for different reasons. I just want to make some friends, right? I want to sell the cookies. But you see that the group has a common purpose despite all the individuals' different motives, but they join the group and there is a common purpose. So number 2, there's a feeling, a sense of belonging and identity. Like, I'm proud to say I'm a member of the group Girl Scouts. I'm part of pack or group troop. That's Scout language, sorry. A Girl Scout unit, XX5, right? And you wear the uniform, and which identifies you, and you feel a sense of belonging, right? So, and you have a bumper sticker, you have things that represent, and you're proud to represent that I belong to the Girl Scouts. And then number 3 is exerting influence and leadership. So all the Girl Scouts meet and influence each other about all sorts of different things, right? Whatever they're doing in the Scouts, and on a social level, on a peer pressure level. Leadership also emerges because in a group of people, you kind of see, everybody by themselves, but in essence leads themselves, right? But when you get in a group of people, you kind of see who's going to step forward and lead the whole group, as opposed to people who'd rather not, right? So they'd rather be followers. And actually, they say that like 50% of job promotions are actually turned down. People say no thank you, because even though there's more pay, there's a lot more responsibility, right? And then all these things change at work. And if you're comfortable where you are, a lot of people, it shows you that people don't want to be leaders, right? They don't want to be promoted. They like being where they are. So small, let's again define small group communication. Is defined as communication among a small group of people who share a common purpose, feel a sense of belonging to the group, and who exert influence on one another, right? So there you go. So let's say we're a gang, right? We're the COMS 045 gang. We're going to do some drug trafficking. We're going to do some pimping and prostitution. We're going to do some extortion, gambling. All right. So what's our common purpose? Yeah, to survive, make money, dominate. It's kind of interesting. What is the purpose of a gang? To successfully do the crimes I mentioned. And then we all sense a belonging to the group because we wear and talk a certain way, and we hang out, we eat together, we drink together, we kill together, we party together, we like dress, all red or all blue, we all get tattoos. There's something that really shows how we are like, yeah, we belong to this group. And then finally, we all influence each other. right? The way we talk, who we date, where we go, what we do for fun, because you share Taylor Swift with the gang, and the gang's like, yeah, Taylor Swift's awesome. And so, you know, and then other people are like, nah, Taylor Swift sucks. But so you're creating influence, positive or negative, you know, on the group. So that all those things together, purpose, identity, influence, you have a group. All right, so 1.2, team communication. So all teams are groups, but not all groups are teams, right? So because groups are just, you know, common purpose, identity, and what we saw was mutual influence. A team is a coordinated group of individuals organized to work together to achieve a specific common goal, right? So they are much more focused and more organized, teams are than most groups. And they're there to achieve a very specific common goal. So there are 4 characteristics of a team. So number 1, team goals are clear and specific. It's like, let's win the game, let's win the championship. This team, we need to make this fundraiser happen, right? Or we want to raise like this amount of money. So they're always very clear and specific, right? Your group, it's like, what are your goals? Everyone passes? Or is it everyone gets an A? Or everyone, let's learn as much as possible. Team goals are very clear and specific, right? There's like, you can measure it and see how we're doing. So number 2, teams have well-defined team member responsibilities, such as positions on a sports team. You know, you play first base, shortstop, sorry, or defense or offense, and midfield, or you're the kicker, the punter, or the safety, or the wide receiver. So teams have very well-defined team member responsibilities. When you're doing your group in this class, group work, you'll see that like sometimes some of the group members have pretty well-defined responsibilities. Others, it's not so clear, right? Which kind of tells you we're not a team or a group. Maybe we can become a team though, because again, teams tend to be better than groups, right? They're just people are more committed, right? If I'm going to go to war, I want to go to war with a team, not a group, if that makes sense, right? Groups are just random people thrown together. A team would be like, we have, you know, there's a lot of much more meshing going on. And number 3, the rules and expectations are clear, and how it operates are spelled out, right? So rules for the team, very clear, everybody knows them. And the expectations for the team, very clear, everybody knows them, and people on the team follow it, right? They don't do selfish things to hurt the team. Number 4, teams usually develop a clear way of coordinating their efforts, right? They have clear ways of communicating, the verbal, the channels that they use, the words that they use, the nonverbal words that they maybe expressions that they use. You know, like, I see something, right? And I'm telling the team, so be quiet, be careful. It's a warning. And then I was also just, you know, the way they communicate on email, messaging, on the radio, you know, walkie-talkies and stuff like that nature. So super coordinated. You might do this in your group, it's possible. But anyhow, and teams are usually together for a long time compared to your group. You're together for 8 weeks, and the semester class ends, and then you're no longer together, right? So it's a lot different. And the U.S. Navy USN SEAL team, they actually refer to themselves as the team. So here's a photo of some Navy SEALs, right? And just shows you that they're, in the end, they're always about the teamwork. In a lot of ways, they epitomize teamwork, because if they go in somewhere, they could all die if they don't work together, right? So, okay, 1.21, let's team develop clear, well-defined goals. So team goals are clear, specific, they're measurable, grade point average, right? Or it could be like, you know, how much money raised or made. It could be, you know, like sales done, and they're also more than could be achieved by any individuals on the team, right? So team goals are set here where no individual can reach those, but the team together can reach those goals specific, right? And researchers found convincing evidence that teams develop and use clear goals perform better than groups without clear-cut goals. So once I'm placed in my group on next week, one of the things I might say in the discussion is, hey, let's set out some clear, specific, and measurable team goals. Like, let's get this everything done on time, like from now until the end of the semester, right? Let's make sure everybody communicates regularly, right? By text message, or, you know, WhatsApp, or we're on a Discord server, or we're using Zoom, and we're going to figure out a regular class meeting time, maybe like right after our class. You just make your own Zoom meeting through your group for 10 minutes and just make sure everyone's talking to each other, are on their assignments, know what they're supposed to do. And Teams develop clearly defined roles, duties, and responsibilities for team members, right? So it'll be like, okay, who's going to take care of research? Who's going to do slideshows? Who's going to do editing? Or who's going to do video? Who's going to be the mom of the team, the nurturer, reminder of the due dates, and it makes everything happen, right? And then you have you figure out all the different roles, duties, and responsibilities that make you succeed in this class as a group, and then you make sure everybody knows who's doing one of those roles, duties, and responsibilities. And teams have clearly defined rules for and expectations about team operation. So that's all very clear. It's not just assumed that everyone's going to do it on time and work hard. You actually put that out on your Canvas discussion. Say, hey, these are the rules for our group, and let's make sure everybody knows them and follows them, and let's buy in, right? And teams have coordinated and collaborative methods for accomplishing the work. So they do a lot of coordination and they do a lot of collaboration, right? So working together and organizing together. Here's a story about NBA players. It was Shaquille O'Neal and Goran Dragic. This is actually pretty old. It's a 2008, 2009. It's a story about how Shaquille O'Neal is a multi-millionaire superstar player and a veteran, and Goran Dragic that year was a rookie. He was a new guy. And the story, just from the RookieWireUSA.com, just talks about how Shaq made him carry this giant keyboard on the bus to the plane, from the plane to the hotel. And at the end of the year, Goran asked Shaq, "Did you ever play the keyboard I was carrying around the whole damn year?" And he's like, "No." And so Goran says, "Why not?" And Shaq says, "It doesn't work. It's broken." Right? So I had to carry this keyboard the whole season. That was my rookie duty. And so he did it because it was his duty and his role and his responsibility to do this, right? Even though it's pointless, it's just kind of veteran hazing of the rookie. But you should also know the veteran would pay for a lot of the meals and activities that the team would do. He would take the rookies out. So there's kind of like this mentoring thing you kind of see, but then you got to, give the rookie a hazing duty. And that's a good example of this. So, you got to haul this keyboard around, even though you're an NBA player, and then the keyboard didn't even work, right? It was just the point of, this is your job, do it. Okay. And so, and Goran really thought that was great. That's something that you learn, and then when you're a veteran, you kind of teach the other rookies that. But remember that not only do you teach them to do these things, but you're taking care of them, on the side and doing a lot of good things like that. So showing them the ropes about how to be an NBA player. Okay. So 1, 2, 2. Let's talk about the characteristics of an effective team. So number one, you have a clear elevating goal. That's the most important thing. A team has just this preeminent goal. And everybody in the team is working towards that preeminent goal, right? So, for example, I might say, oh, it's Halloween coming up, and we're going to form a Halloween team to make sure all the kids on the team have awesome Halloween, and that's the goal, right? That's above everything else. Cool, safe, fun Halloween. All right. So number two, we have a results-driven structure. So to be results-driven, you have to have an efficient, organized, and structured method of achieving team outcomes. So how do we measure whether the Halloween is safe and fun? So we ask the kids, how much candy do you collect? Like, the most candy is good, right? It's interesting about how will we measure that, right? How much beer do I get to drink on Halloween as I do a little bit of trick-or-treating? Because we're going to definitely do a little bit of adult. I try and mix it all together, right? And I'm not going to do anything because I have to drive back, where you're drunk. But I'm a social drinker, by the way, too. So 1 or 2 beers in like 2 hours of trick or treating. It'll be cold as hell too, by the way. So I'll be bundled up. I'll be in a onesie. I have a costume. I'm gonna be wearing this crown, and I have a tiger onesie. So does anybody want to guess my costume? I have this crown, and I'm wearing a bright orange tiger onesie with I'll have a painted face with whiskers, orange and white. I'm the Tiger King. I never watched the show on Netflix, but I know enough about it where I was like, yeah, that'll work. So I'm gonna speak in the Southern drawl, a Louisiana accent. This is my parish. Okay, so number 3, we have good communication skills. So everybody on the team is good at communicating, verbally, non-verbally, right? On being, in the group chat, being responsive, right? And then number 4, there's adequate resources for every team member to succeed. So for this class, it would be everybody has good internet, a good computer, good camera, you have good Google Docs, and whatever else you need, the time and a good place to work. You know, it would be a great resource if you were a real team meeting in person, would be someone on the team has a space where all of you could come meet, right? Instead of like going to the library or going to Starbucks or something like that. A good example would be I actually went to business school where you get your MBA, your master's in business administration, and business school is like 70% group work. So it's 2 years long. And the first day you get placed in a group and you're in the same group for the entire year. And you go through all the classes together and work as a group together. So, and one of the things that was interesting is I was actually working at a law firm at the time, part-time. And so I had the keys to the law firm, and we could go there at like 8 p.m. Until like midnight and use the conference room. So it was quiet, there's a photocopy machine, there's internet, plenty of desks, giant table, lots of big chairs. It was a great place to do group work, private, all the resources. And I remember every time we went there, the group members were like, this is so awesome that you have access to this, right? So yeah, it's a great resource that one of the group members brings to the team or to the group. So, and the number 5 is leadership. Good teams, effective teams have leadership. You need a leader. But we'll talk about that a lot more in depth in like chapter 8 or chapter 9, like, you know, like how important is a leadership? What kind of leadership is the best? Okay, so 1, 2, 4, characteristics of an effective team, members. So first we'll talk about some do nots, like don't be this kind of team member. All right, so untrusting, right? Trust your teammates, assume they'll do the assignments and work and are responsible, right? Later on, if they violate that trust, you know, that's different issue. But from the beginning, you want to just, you know, trust is important. Trust is an important foundation of important group work. It's, you know, think about how trust is important in every relationship you have with another person. That like, if you come to my house, I trust you not to steal my wallet. I trust you, you know, not to like kick my dog. I trust you to, you know, like not do anything with my children. And then I trust you to just, you know, like get my back if something happens, right? As dudes, that's pretty important, like loyalty. And number 2, you know, do not fear conflict. Conflict is inevitable. It's going to happen. In every group you're in, there will be conflict. There's no way to avoid it. So it's more about how to manage it. So don't fear it because it's going to happen, right? So be like, I know how to deal with conflict. That's what you have to learn. Number 3 is don't be committed to the team. Yeah. So commitment's important. Everybody is committed, team succeeds. People have commitment issues, team will fail. Has anybody ever been in a music band or know somebody been in a band? I find that commitment is the biggest reason bands fail. Because you see like one, you know, the drummer or the lead singer gets married, moves away, or has children, or isn't making enough money, has to go do their other job, or they're not, right? There's just so many reasons. And what I notice is that a lot of musical bands succeed because all the members of the band are committed to the band. They're not going to have other priorities, and then they just leave the team or the group, right? And because a lot of times if you can't find a new musician to fill the group, you know, if you remember like Red Hot Chili Peppers, there's some famous bands that have lost band members due to death, or the people left the band, and finding the replacement can be really, really, really tough. So, okay. Avoid accountability. So that's a do not. Yeah. So be accountable, right? Are you a self-responsible, accountable person? That's an interesting question, huh? Are you accountable to yourself? Are you accountable to your boss, your mom and dad, to some of your friends, your mentors? You know, if you join a team, like a soccer team, basketball team, are you accountable? Do you show up, practice games? You know, that's an interesting question. I think a lot of people who, I think if you're accountable, you're going to do really well in life, by the way. I really do that. And by the way, being accountable sucks because you have to, it's hard. I get it, right? So that's why a lot of people want to avoid it. You avoid, people run from the consequences of their behavior a lot. I see that constantly. So yeah, I'm always like, no, just be accountable. Like, you know, if you break something that's not yours, pay for it, right? Like a good accountable person, if you bump someone's car in a parking lot, you'll leave a note. what do non-accountable people do? I think that is a lot of people, because you catch them on security cameras. They dent your car in a parking lot and they do nothing, right? They just bail, and you end up being a victim, right? And which is why you have comprehensive insurance on your insurance, auto insurance usually. So right, it's just that's a prime example of people like that are not accountable. You see that they don't care about their consequences of their own behavior. Right? Accountable people always measure that and take responsibility for that and suffer the good and the bad. And number 5, don't focus on achieving results. So that's a do not. So results matter. You know, some people don't like that because it's like competitive. You're scrutinized, but that's the world. If you really want to be successful, you have to be comfortable that you've got the magnifying glass right on you and you're being scrutinized, right? But you're okay with that because your hardest critic is you. So who cares about what other people are doing, right? And so results is important. Focus in life. No one cares about your excuses. In the end, it just really doesn't matter. You either produce or you do not produce. I mean, I understand there are circumstances and they do affect things, but I've noticed life doesn't give a shit. Life doesn't care if you die, right? It just, you turn into dirt and it takes you. It's people mess with you all the time and don't care. So I'm just telling you, yeah, focus on results, be comfortable with results, and understand that you can now understand, looking at results, how you're doing, right? I know when I was in law school, I went to pick up my grades. They would come in a little envelope, and you only have a number. You don't go by name, and they just, so you have like a secret code. Like, you know, I was like number like 76454, and you ask for that and get your grades. And then when I went to go pick them up, I was talking to the school secretary, and when she picked up my grades, I saw that there were still tons of them from like last year. It's like, whoa, a lot of people never go pick up their grades. And she's like, yeah, a lot of people don't care. They just want to graduate. And they don't really, I was more like, you probably don't want to know because they're not that good. People who have good grades want to know, because you get class ranked and then you get job offers based on your class rank in law school. So the results matter is what I'm trying to tell you. Like when you're in a professional graduate school program, you see the results are very out there and everyone can see what's going on and they matter. It's like people at the top get the jobs, people at the bottom, you have to go find other options. So those are the 5 do nots. Some do's. Experience matters, and there's only one way to get it. Get in groups, participate, learn from them, and figure out what works and what doesn't, and how you fit in really well, right? So group member experience is a good thing. So don't quit groups that aren't that fun or interesting all the time. Just the experience of being in group work and communicating with all these people and having relationships around all these mental dimensions is just a great experience, right? It'll make you better for group work in the future. I'm pretty enthusiastic, but I look back how now that I'm older, I would totally change some of my behavior in different groups when I was younger. Because when I was younger, I was kind of a punk sometimes and didn't give a damn, right? Now I'm like, I do care. And so I see how you're doing things when you're young that have consequences to the people around you, but you don't understand that, or you don't really care, or sometimes it's just hard to understand that at that point in your life. So some other dudes are problem solving skills. You know, are you tech savvy? You better be, right? Can you solve, like, you know, problems related to the internet or computers or routers? I just got a new phone, switching over my old phone that dropped and cracked, and got this one. And it's like, there's a lot of little things going on, passwords, and just to make all the apps work. And it's just, you know, it's burdensome, cumbersome, but I can solve all those problems. And then sometimes you got to pay money to solve problems because it's beyond your ability. I actually paid $150 to a plumber to install the new shower system, and it took him like 10 minutes. I was like, and then I had to move the hot tub to the backyard deck. And I hired this company to do it, and it took him like 10 minutes. That was $300. So you just realize sometimes because I couldn't move the 800-pound hot tub, but me and my friends couldn't move it and they had some special, that is a really like interesting sled thing where they put the hot tub on the sled and they pulled it to the back. And it was like this giant toboggan that you could, and with a big plastic shield, so you could drag it on dirt and rocks and wouldn't really mess up the sled. So it was they had a tool that was really awesome, right? So it helped solve that problem. So don't run from problems. Don't run from challenges. Tackle them head on. Learn how to solve them. I'm telling you, that's the way to be successful in life. You see a big hill, you go, let's go up, and you figure out how to motivate one step at a time. You don't look at it and go like, fuck, that's gonna suck, right? That kind of negativity and pessimism spreads like cancer, and everybody else gets all negative too. So openness. Can you take criticism? Are you open-minded? So this is really good, right? Be open. I think open also means like when you're in a group, share stuff a little bit, share stuff because you're being open about, if you watch my introduction speech video, for example, you'll learn that my sister died. It's actually coming up on the 30-year anniversary because it was 1992. So 2022 in December, in about a month and a half, will be the 30-year anniversary. That kind of blows my mind. I'm thinking about my sister right now. It's kind of funny. The reason is some of the images are very blurry now because after 30 years, it's like, I have photos. It's not like we have digital photos galore because like back in 1992 it was kind of like the old photograph kind of thing. But anyhow, yeah, just, how open are you? And that's a good thing too. Supportiveness, listen to people, be optimistic, be supportive, high fives, be encouraging. You kind of want to be that cheerleader, even though it might seem a little cheesy. That might be your role in the group, that you're optimistic and supportive and you can kind of be the cheerleader and kind of lift everybody up all the time, right? Bring a lot of energy, enthusiasm to the group. Also be action oriented. Remember, procrastination is the devil, by the way. That's why time managers succeed, because you figure out ways not to procrastinate because these things are important and you time prioritize them. By the way, stress causes fight or flight reaction in human beings, and flight is procrastination, right? You put off things, you delay, ignore things because you don't want to deal with them. You put them off, right? Because they cause you stress. So being action oriented is a lot about the fight, right? Are you a fight or flight person? Because when humans, being our brain, suffer stress of any sort, we tend to have a fight or flight instinct, boom, right away. So positive personal style. Remember, patience is a virtue. Be friendly, learn everybody's names. Again, be encouraging and supportive. Learn people, your group members or team members' backgrounds. People are impressed when you meet somebody and then you meet them again for the second time and you can recollect things about them, right? Like how many of us meet people and then we don't even remember their name the next day, right? So think about if you can remember the name and a bunch of stuff about them. It's just kind of like, oh wow, like that's cool, right? I noticed for me, people really like that, and it creates a door where a friendship and a relationship can really continue and progress. So let's talk about positive overall team perceptions. That's another one. So be optimistic in the team. And you ever seen somebody who's in a group and they're like, we suck, or we're gonna fail, or we can't do this, right? That's the exact opposite. That's being negative. So bring a lot of positive overall team perceptions, right? We will succeed. We can do this, right? Si se puede. Effective team members believe they have the skills and resources to accomplish their tasks. Team members who think they will be less effective are in fact less effective, right? So it's what we call a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if you say we suck, or I suck at this, or we're not going to do it, you're basically convincing yourself that it's true. And then that's what happens. So get rid of all that negativity, right? Because it actually creates, it becomes real, right? So team member optimism appears to enhance team effectiveness. So optimism reigns. I used to always say, like back in the day, they'd ask you like a personality question. Are you a pessimist or an optimist? Or for example, do you see the glass as half full or do you see it as half empty? And I was like, it's half. So I was like, I'm a realist, right? I'm not negative. I'm not positive. I just try and do whatever the situation I described as being real. But research actually shows that optimism is important. And I understand that now, that not everyone wants to know what the truth and the reality of the situation is. They want to just be hopeful and have faith that something will happen positive in the end. So yeah. So training helps a lot to create team member optimism. Does everybody remember the story about Starbucks? These two black guys were in the Philadelphia Starbucks kind of hanging out waiting for somebody, and they were kicked out for not spending money. And by the way, Starbucks is not, they usually don't care if you hang out in Starbucks and loiter there and use their Wi-Fi and don't buy anything. But because they're black, interesting enough, and then when they didn't leave, they called the cops on them, right? So this became a huge issue. And then Starbucks was like, we're sorry, this is really bad. And they actually closed every store, all 8,000 of them, on May 29th for the afternoon. and they did racial bias training for every Starbucks employee in 2018. So it's like, yeah, that's an example of how you try and create effective team members. You train them, and very, very specifically to how to deal with these different situations. And then there's team learning and adapting, because change is constant. People come and go, people's circumstances change, their priorities change. So adapt and learn from your success and failure. I would tell you one of the most important things in life is to be adaptive in every dimension, right? Like, adapt to the people you're around constantly, because some people are like, saying, there's a saying that you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Like, people like to do whatever they do, and then the more older they get, the more set they are in their ways. I try to be the opposite. I'm constantly trying to adapt and learn. I've actually noticed that the older you get, the less you adapt and learn, the less you really fit into that current version of society. And if you feel left behind by society, you tend to die. Like, you don't feel like you belong, and your spirit to live lessens, right? And you yearn for a generation or a past that's gone, that's no longer there anymore, right? Like using ATM machines and VHS, and like a lot of things that people like the old way, and they don't want to learn, right? So does anybody know anybody like that, like an old person who just hasn't learned how to use like their smartphone? My mom and dad are like that. They're in their they just turned 82 and 81, and they can't use most of the apps on a smartphone, because I actually pay for their phone and just give them to them. And I'm always like, you can do this, you can watch that. And they're always like, what? No. All they do is text, call, and use the camera a little bit, and do a little bit of GPS. No social media, nothing else. And it's just a great example. They just don't want to learn. But I'm always telling them, you should learn, you got to learn, it's important. All right, so apply this to real life. This is from Jessica Thompson in chapter 1. And these are all things you should do to enhance your perception of competence. Remember, perception is people think you are, not whether you really are, right? Like, fake it till you make it. So be there, right? So just one of the first things you could do in a group is just be there. Go to all the meetings, be on time, do everything you're supposed to do. Yeah, that's simple, huh? 2/3 of life is just showing up. That's Andy Warhol. So talk about trusting others. We talk about how trust is important. So like, talk about trust. Talk about the task. What do we need to do? We need to get a storytime outline done. Then we need to do a slideshow. Then we need to do the storytime presentation. Then we have an informative speech topic and outline, and then slideshow, and then presentation. Then we've got one for persuasive, and then we've got a business presentation. Be clever, be witty. People love people who are funny, spontaneous. Share a meme in your group chat that you just think is funny. Not that just you think is funny, but like everyone will relate to, right? There are a lot of things you can do to just be clever and witty. I really believe in being clever and witty, because they're kind of being spontaneous. You can't really plan these out. Things happen in life where you can just say something witty or be clever in a moment, and it's not a bad, it's just, people are amused. I actually had a girlfriend one time. She always said to me, you're the most clever, witty person I've ever met in my life, right? And I was like, yeah, I try to be clever and witty. The reason I know I'm good at it is because I do it a lot in job interviews, right? And it's hard to be spontaneously kind of clever and witty in job interview, because things have to happen that you just kind of like are like, oh, this is going to be a funny answer to this question, right? So and I've been able to pull that stuff off a lot of times and get people to laugh. And I've had a lot of job interview people tell me, that was really awesome, you got us to laugh a lot during the job interview. A lot of times they're kind of serious, right? And the people are kind of like, and they're really nervous. So just the fact that you can be clever and witty during a job interview, it really kind of expresses confidence, and also be a good listener. Listen to your group mates, what their issues are, problems. Be patient, right? Just be a good listener. Sometimes people want to talk about stuff that has nothing to do with the group, right? They just share some stuff going on in their life. That's cool too. Talk backstage. So behind the scenes, what's going on, right? So you have a group member who's maybe like doing stuff a little bit late, and you might say, hey, like, just not talking about group work, just like, is everything going on okay at home or with work or your parents or your boyfriend or girlfriend, right? And then sometimes you find out like, oh, they got like, I've seen the students get dumped, and they're hella depressed, and they pretty much fail out of school. They just stop doing everything, showing up for everything, because they're just all, they got the blues. And so yeah, talk backstage and find out, oh yeah, I wouldn't be wanting to do any of this stuff either if I just got dumped and I'm all emo and hurt, right? So I get it. You got to heal, it takes things out. But that's what I would tell you. Part of me is like, I don't know if I would date in college, if that makes sense. Just because of the sense that, like, if it's a distraction, and also if things go wrong, it could hurt your academics, just because you get, it's hard, wounds to the heart don't always heal fast. So my job in college was to graduate, like, number one. I wasn't to, like, have a girlfriend, wasn't to, like, go party or go do this or that. It was, number one was just graduate. Graduate, because I went to University of Miami, is a private school, tuition's big time. I had a big scholarship though, that helped a lot, but still my parents are forking out tons of money so I can live in Miami, right, while I go to school. So I was just like, that was my number one priority. Definitely just take all the classes, don't drop, get the best grade you can, get that degree, move on to the next thing in your life, right? Which was law school is in the planning since I was like 11 years old. So when I was a little kid, everybody was like, "You like to talk, you like to argue, you should be a lawyer." And then one of my Sunday school teacher, actually, he was a very, very influential person in my life. He was a lawyer, and he was really well respected and seemed to do very well financially, and his career seemed very prestigious. So yeah, I don't know if like you, but for me, I kind of knew my career path since I was about 10 or 11 years old, and it's just been this path that I followed the whole way. So laugh and have fun. Again, share memes, jokes, keep it light and fluffy, right? Angels fly because they're light and not weighed down by, heavy thoughts and burdens. So laugh and have fun. I think that's important. That could be your role in the group, by the way. You're the jokester. You're the person who just keeps it light, keeps it funny, always has a joke for the moment, right? And something like that. So, and try not to do these things. Be negative, use mean humor, express your boredom, verbally or non-verbally, right? Because you could say I'm bored, or you can do this, right? And that's the same thing. So don't do that. And grab credit. Don't be a braggart, right? If you're gonna mention success, you don't say I'm awesome. You always say thank God, and you thank your mom, and you thank the team. That's actually the standard interview reply. You tell every athlete, if you're interviewed on TV after the game on the radio, and your team won, and you're the star player of the game, you always say humbly, thank the coach, thank God, thank my teammates, and thank my mom. And they just say, that's a great, you can't go wrong by saying that, right? As everybody seen, and comes off as very humble. So if you're ever interviewed, you take kids off of screaming children off a fiery bus, and everybody's like, "You're a hero." You just say, "I just want to thank God." If you're an atheist, you can skip that part. You just want to say, "I want to thank my teammates or the firefighters, first responders who helped me. Thank my mom. She's awesome. Hi, mom." Right? And right, perfect answer. Okay, so 1.3, communicating collaboratively. So how do we communicate in a way where we work together? So joining a group or team is going to happen many times in your life, so let's prepare. So first let's learn about some positives and negatives of our groups, right? So here are the advantages, 1.31, 1.32, we'll talk about the disadvantages. What are the negatives of being in a group? There are a bunch of them, but let's first talk about the advantages. So groups have more information or resources. Research shows that diversity results in better ideas and solutions. So if you have one person, you're by yourself, you have so much information about the world or your topic, and then you have, what resources that you can bring to the table. In a group, a lot more resources and a lot more information, right? And also, the more brains, the better, is the general philosophy for that, right? So, but remember, keep your group small, because the bigger it is, the harder it is to actually manage. But you want to have enough people in your group where you can achieve your goal or task, right? So groups stimulate creativity. So the more brains, again, the better, right? For creativity's sake, groups are really, really good. You're always going to be much more creative in a group than you are by yourself. So let's say we're at Pixar, we're in a group, right? And I'm like, let's make the next Pixar movie. It's going to be about, what? Is it Encanto or Luca, or like, I forgot what the movie was called, by the way. They're kind of on this little theme of covering different cultures and languages throughout the world. And so you can predict kind of like what the next Pixar is going to be. So the groups of people are going to be much more creative in picking the next Pixar movie than you are by yourself. You just right. So really good for creativity. And you remember what you discuss. You have improved comprehension when you discuss things in a group. You remember things much better and learn things much better than maybe like studying something by yourself. You're also more likely to be satisfied with the decision you help make that you help make, that there's buy-in. So in a group, people, when the group makes decisions, there's a lot more satisfaction with the group's decision if people help actually make the decision as well, right? You're not just told what we decided to do, you have a part, say in what we decide to do. And you also gain a better understanding of yourself. One of the biggest things you'll learn about in this class is yourself and whether you like working in groups and what kind of people you like working with. It could be like, oh, I prefer working with men or women, or depends on the personality or what age group or what kinds of you'll come up with just some groups of people that or types of people that maybe you learn that to dislike, and people that you're like, oh, I really like working with these types of people, right? I'll give you a good example. There are times when I have been on a team and it's like all guys and we're all at the same age. We have a lot of commonalities and interests, like on or off the court or the field or the pitch. So this is an example of that. All right, disadvantages. Well, there's pressure to conform, what we call groupthink. You let the majority win to avoid conflict, right? So you're in a group of friends and they're all like, let's go eat some sushi. You really don't want to go eat sushi, but you're like, I'm gonna let them go to sushi, and even though I don't really want to go, but I'll go anyhow because I don't want to cause a conflict, right? I don't want to rock the boat. So yeah, there's a lot of pressure to conform, even though conform is like you take the shape that they're forcing onto you as opposed to the shape that you want to be. And so in a group, there's a lot of pressure to conform. Individual domination may also occur. Can we create any examples which results in less participation? Anybody been in a group where there's just the person dominates, talks a lot, interrupts people, acts elitist or acts like they're better than everybody else, right? And so that's a negative. Social loafing, this happens all the damn time in a group. This is where some people get lazy and let others do the hard or the dirty work, right? I'll give you a great example. We're cooking dinner for a bunch of people, right? So there's like 4 or 5 people in the kitchen. There's always going to be one person in the kitchen who's kind of being lazy because they're letting the other people do the hard work in the kitchen or the dirty work in the kitchen. Does that make sense? They'll kind of stand around and be, they'll wait to be told what to do instead of having initiative. And that's something that happens in every group, right? In every group. Not like I said, they're inequitable. Not everyone puts the same amount of effort into a group. And that's just always what happens. Some people put in a lot more effort and other people are loafing. And that's just what they always do. And then time. Groups take more time for everything. That's probably the biggest disadvantage. Everything you do in a group takes more time. Think about, I'm going to go eat dinner. You're by yourself. You just decide where you want to go eat. You're in a group. It can take a long time. I've actually been in a group of friends where like 3 or 4 hours pass. We're all hungry and we're still haven't decided where we're going to go eat, right? And you're like, fuck this. I'm out of here. I'm going to go eat dinner, right? Because you just realize this group isn't going to ever decide and ever going to go eat. So biggest disadvantage. So one of the reasons you may not want to be in a group is because there's just no time, right? There's no time. You got to go, got to leave, got to get this decided. But if you have time, groups can help you do things that you can't achieve by yourself. So 1 through 3, when not to collaborate, when there's limited time. Just talked about that. When an expert already has the answer. So you don't need to decide as a group, right? Like as a family, what should we do? Like, oh, the expert already has the answer. You should do this, right? And like, okay, let's listen to the expert. Third, when the information is readily available from research sources. So we don't need the group to decide and debate this. We can do some research and find out, get the information we need, right? And then fourth, when there is unmanageable conflict. So sometimes working in a group with people there's just a lot of conflict, it's probably not worth being in that group anymore, right? And I'm sure we've all been in a group where there's just a lot of conflict, and so we leave, right? It's just not fun to be around that drama and that conflict and that negativity all the time, right? 1, 3, 4, me versus we. So culture matters. We're going to learn about individualist and collectivist cultures. This is from table 1.1 on page 11 of your textbook. So according to Geert Hofstede, and Hofstede is a famous kind of study of culture, and he framed these different elements that you want to look at them. One of them is individualism or collectivism, right? Is the culture all about me, or is it about we, or the team? So individualism is the emotional independence from groups, organizations, or other collectivities. Individualistic cultures value individual recognition more than group or team recognition. They encourage self-actualization, the achievement of one's potential as an individual. The United States, us, Britain, and Australia usually top the list of countries in which individual rights and accomplishment are valued over collective achievement. So we are some of the biggest individualists on the whole earth, Americans. We really believe in individual achievement rather than our neighborhood achieving something, or our cities, or our states, or our country, or our entire planet. All right, so by contrast, collectivist groups, cultures value group or team achievement more than individual achievement. So people from Asian countries such as Japan, China, or Taiwan typically value collaboration and collective culture achievement more than do those from individualistic cultures. So the opposite of the United States, Britain, and Australia, these are all white English-speaking nations, by the way, are Asians, or Japan, China, and Taiwan. They really value collectivism over the individual. And Venezuela, Colombia, and Pakistan are other countries in which people score high on a collective approach to work methods. So Fukushima, Japan, earthquake 2011, there's a tsunami, the nuclear power plant is wiped out. There's a radioactive zone. Who in Japan volunteered to clean up the nuclear, in the radioactive zone? Think about this, right? You have this nuclear disaster due to the tsunami at Fukushima, the Fukushima Daiichi reactor plant. And so you got to clean it up. But if you go in there and clean it up, you're going to get cancer and die eventually, right? Because it's a huge radioactive zone. So Japanese people are collectivists. They're not individualists. So that tells you somebody in Japan is willing to take one for the team. We'll go do this because it's good for Japan, even though it's bad for me, the individual, right? Anybody want to guess who in Japan volunteered to do this crazy job? It was the elderly. They all said, we have lived our lives, done things, raised our children. We're going to die. We're at the end of our lives. So if anybody's going to go in there, because somebody has to do it, we will do it, right? And they were like, thanks, grandma, grandpa, but no. But does everybody see that? It shows that they're the collectivist thinking. Like, I will sacrifice myself for the greater good, for the team, right? That's very collectivist thinking. That's Japanese thinking. Americans would have been like, who's going to go in there? Not me, right? Nobody wants to sacrifice themselves individually for the greater good, because we're very individualistic, right? So that's like the example of the difference there. So, all right. 1.4, communicating in different, and you should think, by the way, are you an individualist or a collectivist? Do you care about your own personal goals and achievements and distinctions, and you don't care about how others do? You're really just focused on yourself, right? And that's not a bad thing, by the way. It's not being selfish, right? It's just I think it's just, that's natural. Or are you really always thinking about the greater good? So I am I'm a hybrid of both, because I think because my parents were Korean, they were collectivist, and I got a lot of that from them. But as in my cultural assimilation as an American individualist, I have some of that coming in too. So I'm like, it's kind of interesting. But I'm much more collectivist than your average American. I'll give you a great example. I share my French fries all the time. I just remember when kids sometimes would have French fries, right? There's a bunch of kids could want some, and they'd be like, no, mine, right? And then I noticed my instinct is always to share what I have. And I've been told, like, dude, why do you do that? That's dumb. Why would you want to share your goodies with everybody else? And I'm like, sometimes I'm like, I don't know. It's just sort of a collectivist thing. I care about the team. Everybody should eat, not just me. right? So, okay, let's learn about primary and secondary groups and communicating in them now. So 1.41 is primary group. So primary group is a group whose main purpose is to give people a way to fulfill their needs to associate with others. It is primary in the sense that the group meets the primary human need to relate to others. The main function of the primary group is to perpetuate the group so that members can continue to enjoy one another's company. Primary groups typically do not meet regularly to solve problems or make decisions, although they sometimes do both of these things. E.g., for examples given, your family group and friends or social groups. Those are your primary groups, right? These are groups of people you hang out with where you just want to relate to other people, your family and your friends, right? We want relationships. We want relationships, right? We're not the lone wolf, we're the pack wolf, right? We need to be around other wolves. So think about the primary groups that you belong to, where you are in them to just enjoy the company of the other people. So a lot of your friendships. And like, you don't have to go do something to have friends, have fun with your friends. You could sit and talk, right? And you also, the primary purpose of this group is to maintain the group so that you can continue to enjoy each other's company. So you do things to maintain the social group, organize events, parties, invite them to do things, like keep planning things in the future. I've been on some great trips with my friends and everybody's like, we got to do this again next year and make it like an annual thing, right? Like over like the next 10 years, every year we go meet and do this thing here all the time, et cetera, right? And that's a great example of like, you want to do this because you continue to enjoy each other's company. So secondary groups, they're a little different. So most of the groups you belong to at work or at school are secondary groups. You are not involved in a committee or a class group assignment just for fun or to meet your social need for belonging. Those are for primary groups, even though you may enjoy the group and actually make friends with other group members. The main reason you join secondary group is to get something done, right? Just trying to achieve things. There are several kinds of secondary groups to which you may belong to at some point in your life. So problem-solving groups. You belong to a group of people just to help you solve these problems, right? So my example here is my IT friend. So I grew up with somebody, and his name is Greg. He lives in Las Vegas, and he owns like this gigantic computer company, does all kinds of stuff. They're in Las Vegas, by the way, because there's no state income tax. And so when I have some really sophisticated computer issues or tech issues, I'll call or email him or text him, right? And he'll help me with that. For example, I've been contemplating switching my legal work. We use a lot of DocuSign, and we were thinking about shifting because you have to pay them to use that service. We were thinking about, there's actually a bunch of alternatives now, these legal document signing companies besides DocuSign. There's like Adobe has one, and there's actually quite a few. And so we were thinking about shifting over. I was like, okay, so how do I was like, okay, I called Greg. I was like, how do I do this? Because I have to get rid of DocuSign, change my website, change all the payment services, the contract stuff, right? Everything's, and then he's like, yeah, I'll actually do it for you because it's something you probably can't do by yourself. I was like, okay, cool, this is good because why not? Alternative DocuSign that's cheaper. All right, or doctor friend. So that's what MD means. PB is my doctor friend. So his name's Peter also, by the way. So yeah, so I have medical health related problems. I call him. I try and solve my problems, right? What's this ache? What's this bruise for? Why do I have this? What's COVID symptoms? And just, yeah. And by the way, the doctor uses me too, because you realize that talking to your friends is good for your mental and emotional health. And so I may use him for medical advice, but then he uses me just as, general, just, the support friendship relationship. So yeah, medical doctors have had a hard time during COVID. It's been stressful on them, and they've worked a lot of crazy hours. It was really, really quiet during the beginning, March 20 pandemic part. Nobody came to the hospital, everybody's afraid. But now they've just been overrun, and the doctors are seeing all the health effects of the pandemic now. The mental health effects, the emotional ones, and the physical ones. Because people didn't go to the hospital for like a year, and then they came now, and they all have, they put off all their health issues. But the health issues didn't go away or get better over that year, right? They got worse. So it's been hard. So you also could be part of decision-making groups. So D/M means decision-making, P/S means problem-solving. So yeah, do you have a group of people you consult to make decisions? Should I break up with such my boyfriend or girlfriend? So I actually put in Mr. Bro for money. That's actually supposed to be my bro. So yeah, so when I want to make financial decisions, I generally consult my brother for all of them: stock market, currency, foreign currency exchange, um, crypto. Shoot, we talk about real estate opportunities, investments. We built, did some property development in San Carlos right after I had finished law school, and he had been working for Ariba.com. And so just ever since then, we've just used each other as to help make our financial decisions in our life. Because we know each other. I mean, you know each other for your whole life, 50 plus years. It's like, it's just easy. And there's a trust there. It's so easy, by the way, to talk to him. Like, and you can talk about, you know, even all the money I've lost recently in the stock market because it's down quite a bit. So yeah, so like I needed a bunch of cash to help pay for some the deck I rebuilt the deck this year. It was like almost $60,000, and it was like I don't want to sell my stock because it's down so much I would take a huge loss. So I just was taking the money from other areas, right? It was like so hopefully the stock market rebounds in like I'm gonna guess it's gonna take about 2 years. So hopefully the war in Ukraine goes away. That would be good too for the world economy. And then you have like study groups. You join secondary groups and you study because you want to be academically successful, right? And you don't join a study group for you know because you have relationship needs. You do it because you're trying to learn whatever you're trying to learn. Therapy groups like Alcoholics Anonymous or AA, right? So you join the secondary group to rehabilitate your addiction, not because you're trying to meet cool people. And AA, by the way, you're gonna meet. I know people have been in AA. You meet a lot of interesting people in AA because everybody has a story and you all have an addiction you're trying to battle. So in the end, you have that in common. So yeah, so committees like PTA, like Parent Teacher Association. So you join a secondary group to make the school better, not because of the relationships. Focus groups. Focus groups are usually done for marketing purposes. You ever get invited to join one, you get paid to do it. So for example, you will join a focus group and they'll give you a product like maybe new smartphone with new camera and some other new features. I think the one that you're going to see is a magnetic case. So you can stick your phone to metal magnetically. It makes for a really good car holder and some other ones. You got to go in and make sure the magnets don't mess up the battery and the actual processor and the memory. And some other things and just, but yeah, but I think I talked to a lot of phone. One of my friends worked at Apple, and one of my other friends works at Samsung, and we were talking about the phone design stuff just recently, and they kind of hinted at that. It's very hush hush though. So yeah, so those are the secondary groups you may belong to. So 1.5, communicating virtual groups and teams. That's you. So virtual small group communication, also called electronically mediated communication, or the channel of electronic mediation, consists of 3 or more people who collaborate from different physical locations. That's you all perform interdependent tasks. So interdependent, not independent. Interdependent means you depend on each other, right? You need each other. Whereas independent, you don't need to be, you're not dependent on anybody, right? So you have shared responsibility for the outcome of the work, you get a collective grade, and rely on some form of technology to communicate with one another. So yeah, you're using Zoom or messaging services or the phone or whatever it might be to all communicate. So that's all you all. And the channels of virtual small group communication include voice, video, text, or email or more, like Zoom, Google Meet, Team, Microsoft Teams, Skype, WebEx, etc. So let's talk about 1.52, the difference between virtual and face-to-face collaboration, or FTEC. So what's the difference between meeting on the internet or meeting in person? So there are six key differences. So number one is time. Generally, face-to-face collaboration takes a lot more time. Right? People have to commute there. You could be late. There could be traffic. So time. Number two is varying degrees of anonymity. Face-to-face, you know who you're talking to. On the internet, people are hidden. You don't really know who they are, right? Like there's that thing about Zoom where a lot of people would wear a shirt and a jacket and then have only on shorts or their underwear on underneath, and you can never see that. And then people would stand up at work and walk away and you can see their butt and everybody was like, you got fired, or there was actually examples of that during the pandemic. And so you forget, at home, you feel you're a lot more anonymous, and on the internet, you feel a lot more anonymous. By the way, the anonymity of the internet is why people are so mean on the internet. Right? People would never say things to each other face to face that they do on the internet, and the reason is the internet, you're anonymous, right? Although you can kind of trace people, find their IP address, and there's things you could do, but for the most part, right, people on the internet are fairly anonymous. So number 3 is potential for deception. Not only you're anonymous, but you could just lie on the internet. You could catfish people, right? It's really hard to catfish someone if you met them face to face a bunch, right? So on the internet, you see a lot of deception, spam, a lot of like fraud, a lot of tricks, and a lot of bad things happen via the internet, right? Whereas you don't see that too much as much face to face. Number 4 is nonverbal messaging is missing. Whereas face to face, you can see someone's facial expressions, their gestures, really pick up on all the nonverbal messaging. But on the internet, it's limited. For example, we couldn't do, remember, taste, touch, smell very easily on the internet. Written messages. On the internet, the written messages, and they're recorded so everything people type in chat, it's all recorded, and that's good. In a face-to-face meeting, usually no one writes down anything that someone's really saying, so it's a little bit hard to remember. Like, I've been in a meeting where it was like, what exactly did they say? It was everyone trying to remember, like, right? I was like, yeah, nobody wrote it down. So, and then distance. Obviously, face-to-face message, face-to-face communication, you're there, but on the internet, you could be thousands of miles away from each other. So, okay, so let's look at let's learn a little more about these 6 key differences. So time. First of all, when you have an asynchronous message, is a message that is not read, heard, or seen at the same time you send the message. For example, a lot of these students who are not attending this right now, just besides the 4 of you, they will watch the recorded video later. So that means that it's asynchronous, right? Which is why we call this class asynchronous. There's a time delay between when you send and receive a message. Sending a text message to someone who is not monitoring Facebook or leaving a voice message to someone are examples of asynchronous messages, right? So you send messages and there's some time delay before they get answered, right? It's not simultaneous. Synchronous messages are those that occur instantly and simultaneously. There is no time delay between when you send a message and the other person receives it. A live video conference is an example of a synchronous message. The more synchronous our interaction, the more similar it is to face-to-face interactions. This face-to-face interaction tends to be very synchronous, assuming people are paying attention and interacting. So social presence, the feeling we have when we act and think in a simultaneous face-to-face interaction. So have you ever texted and all responses were immediate? And I'd say that's hot. Has anybody ever texted somebody and like every time you text them, you get an immediate response. Then you immediately respond to that, and then they immediately respond. It's just, and then they call that social presence, right? It's like even though you're doing asynchronous messaging, it's so quick and simultaneous that it almost is like synchronous messaging, right? But for the most part, people don't do that with text messaging, right? There's usually a time delay. So number 2, let's talk about the varying degrees of anonymity. So people online are brutal because of their relative anonymity. Most of us would not do things face-to-face we would do online, as there is a lack of accountability online, right? People are not responsible for what they do on the internet versus they're a bit more responsible in public because people know who you are and can, they can recognize you or figure out who you are. So you're not just behind a keyboard. So number 3 is potential for deception. So a survey of 191 students at one college found that 40% had lied on the internet. 15% lied about their age, 8% lied about their weight, 6% lied about their appearance, 6% about marital status, and 3% even about what sex they were. I'm a boy, but you're really a girl, or you're a girl and you're pretending to be a boy, right? The whole catfishing thing. Number 4, nonverbal messages are missing. Emojis are not enough. There's no tone of voice. And videos can be edited and filtered. So how do you non-verbally express yourself online? It's really challenging. So the face-to-face interaction is so much more rich for that reason, in that all the non-verbal communication is much clearer in a face-to-face than a computer-mediated setting such as this one. So number 5, written messages. Good writers are actually better than poor ones. It affects the virtual collaboration. Would you rather talk to people, video them, or text them? If you didn't know, written messages suck because a lot of people are actually not good at writing. And anybody know somebody like that? You text message them a lot and you just notice that their written messages are kind of hard to understand and they're not always clear. And so you're like, I'd rather call you because just I can ask follow-up questions, right? Figure out what you really mean. So I have a friend like that, and she's dyslexic. So her text messages come out kind of awkward, right? Like it'll be like, meet me here. I'm seeing Ralph, even though Ralph is spelled, R-A-L-P-H. It's just an example of that. So you kind of, when you read that, you kind of like, huh? Like, oh, okay, who's Ralph? Oh, Ralph. Right. And it's just a good example of how, yeah, the written messages is just different, right? Because good writers are better at written messages than poor writers. So and that actually does, it really affects collaboration quite a bit, right? So number 6 is distance. Virtual group members tend to be far away from each other. So let's talk about 1.53, virtual group and team theory. So what we're learning about what we call the cues filled out theory, and then also the media richness theory coming up here. So first of all, let's learn about the cues filled out theory and take a look at the diagram here. So this theory suggests that emotional expression is severely restricted when we communicate using only text messages. And then the nonverbal cues such as facial expression, gestures, and tone of voice are filtered out. So face-to-face interaction is much richer. Online daters will often say meeting someone in person is really, really different from all their online interactions, right? You meet someone online and you text and talk a lot. And you picture who they are, and then you meet them and you're like, whoa, it's totally different. Right. And it shows you that face-to-face interaction is just much really, it's much richer than everything you can do online, even if it's for a really, really long time. Right. Okay. So chat box because I can't see. So so yeah, nonverbal cues are filtered out when you're online, and face-to-face, you get those nonverbal cues. So that's what we call the cues filtered out there. That's right. And text messaging, it's very limited, right? Because there's just no nonverbal emotional expression really going on. Media richness theory says, let's look at all the different, ways we can communicate, not just text messages. So media richness theory suggests that the richness of a communication channel is based upon 4 criteria. So number 1 is the amount of feedback that the communicators can receive. Number 2, the number of cues that the channel can convey, and that can be interpreted by a receiver. Number 3, the variety of language that communicators use. And 4, the potential for expressing emotions and feelings. So using these 4 criteria, you can basically see how media rich something is or how media lean is. So let's look at the answers here. So face-to-face communication is the richest medium. So if you're going to do important things in life, should always be face-to-face, right? Don't just do messaging because it's convenient. Just understand that important things in life should all be done face-to-face, which is why even though Zoom's taking over the world, a lot of business meetings are still going to be done by flying there and meeting face-to-face. Video conferencing is next best, then telephone, then two-way radio. Then you're getting really lack of media richness when you have written address documents such as letters or email, and then you have unaddressed documents like bulk mail and posters, and these are the leanest. Most effective is the more richer, more effective, less leaner medium, less effective. So if you want to be a good communicator, face-to-face as much as you possibly can in life. And then video conferencing, then telephone, then radio, then letters, emails, and then bulk mail posters. So you want to tell grandma happy birthday. Face-to-face is number 1, video conferencing be number 2, telephone be number 3. Then send a card. That'd be way down here. Cover this, by the way. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so 154, social information processing theories. This is the 3rd theory that we're covering here. So the internet and data has changed how nonverbal communication, or NVC, works. It takes longer to emotionally and relationally express yourself via the web than from face-to-face communication because there's a lack of tone of voice and expression. So texting back and forth takes more time than talking in person. Okay, so that's kind of showing that the technology allows us to communicate with people this way, but it takes a lot more time to do texting than a face-to-face communication, which is why I think phone is always the better option. So in comparing, I should take more of my advice, by the way, a little better at that too. I should call more than text, but sometimes I text. It's just so easy, right? But anyhow, in comparing computer-mediated exchanges with face-to-face conversations, Tidwell and Walter did a study, and they found that people in computer-mediated conversations like us asked more direct questions, which resulted in people revealing more, not less, information about themselves when online. So the irony here is that they actually found that some conversations done online, people tended to ask more direct questions than face-to-face, and that actually led people to be more revealing online than face-to-face. So that's pretty interesting, huh? All right, so 1.6, how can you become a competent small group communicator? Well, first of all, we have to be good at appropriate and effective communication, right? So appropriate. Let's talk about some examples of inappropriate versus appropriate, right? Anybody know somebody without a filter? Just like, like they're always bringing up or saying inappropriate stuff. Talking about sex when children are around, or you're talking about like crude humor and just so yeah. So what's appropriate, what's inappropriate in terms of communication when you're in a group of people? What are things that should be off limits, right? Like, how much should you talk about your personal life when you're at work or in a group with people trying to achieve something, right? Or do you just don't ever bring that up, right? It's just some people have different boundaries of what's appropriate and it's inappropriate. Should you swear? Is that appropriate or inappropriate when you're talking to your group? Also, and then think about what's effective and what's ineffective communication. So there's a show on Netflix called Last Chance U, and it's about football teams and basketball teams. And they look at the coaches a lot. And the coaches, I'm like, man, they're pretty ineffective communicators because they swear a lot. They basically are very demeaning. They can be very misogynistic, calling like guys weak ass bitches. And I was like, wow, like if you're gonna communicate and lead a young group of men and a team, I would really, really try and change my communication, my words, verbally and non-verbally, to make it much more effective. Because I think that, well, maybe that's why they're community college football coaches instead of like higher level, the pros or Division One, so or FBS, what we call it. So number two, let's participate. So good, competent small group communicators are participative. They're nice, they're polite, they're respectful. A truly competent communicator is motivated. They must have appropriate knowledge, ethos. They know what they're talking about. And number three, you must have the skills to actually act appropriately. So bring skills, motivation, and appropriate knowledge to the group meeting, so you're prepared and can really succeed in that way. Like I have a Harvest Fest tonight for my my daughter's 5th grade fundraiser, and it's kind of like our own school Halloween event. And I am participating in it, as a parent, because I want to make my children's school event better. And I can do that by adding my hand. I'm actually the pizza delivery pickup dude. So we got like 100 pizzas donated from different restaurants in town. And so I have to go pick them up, like 15 from like 4 different locations. So it'll be like 60 pizzas. And I'll drive them to the Harvest Fest, drop them off so that they can sell them for like $1 a slice. And then they raise the money because the pizzas were free. Because the companies write off the pizzas as tax write-off for a charitable donation. And then they sell the pizza and then they raise money. And the 5th grade class goes on a vacation trip to Yosemite, which I found out 59 5th graders going to Yosemite, $50,000. I saw that's what they charged the school to do this whole bus trip, and they feed them, and it's like 3 days, 3 nights. Something I did that actually too in 5th grade. It was called Yosemite Institute. I barely recollect that, but I do remember that. So, and it was one of the great things about 5th grade. I actually did enjoy that because then next year you go to middle school. So before I go to Harvest Fest, I'm motivated to go and do things. I have all the appropriate knowledge. I know where to go, what time I got to go, where I drop off the pizza, who I'm supposed to meet, or at least I have phone numbers or someone I can text and get all the information. Her name's Tara. And number 3, I have the skills. I can drive, I have a car, I can do everything to pick up the pizza and deliver it. And then I'll hang out with my kids until from 5:30 to 7:30. And then it's over, and then we go get ready for bed, go to school tomorrow, Thursday. And then Monday is a holiday for us. We don't have school on Monday. That's Halloween. I think the teachers were like, we don't want the kids here. So, so there you go. All right, number 1.62, the core competencies of small group communication. So you should bring these core competencies to your group. So first is, let's have a problem-oriented competency. So let's first define the problem. Effective group members clearly and appropriately define or describe the problem to be solved. We have an assignment. This is the what are the obstacles we have to overcome in order to achieve the results that we want, solve this problem. Ineffective group members either define the problem inaccurately or make little or no attempt to clarify the problem or the issues confronting the group. Right? What do I actually really need to do to help the group succeed in its assignments? Right? I don't just wait for me to tell the group leader to tell me, oh, your section is this, go do that, right? Number 2, then you analyze the problem. So effective group members offer statements that clearly and appropriately examine the causes, history, symptoms, and significance of the problem to be solved. Ineffective members either don't analyze the problem or they do so inaccurately or inappropriately, right? So you got to make sure you define a problem and then analyze the problem. All right, so let's apply this. Problem is, we got to go to college. We got to transfer, okay? And then let's analyze the problem. Well, what do I got to do to transfer? got to pass all these classes. They got to be transferable. We got to apply to CSU, UC, private school, some other college. Check out financial aid, right? And you break down all the little things that you got to do to actually solve this problem of, I want to transfer from EVC to San Jose State, right? Or something like that, right? So there you go. Now, you can also do what we call a solution-oriented competency, right? Which is where we're not just focused on the problem, we're going to focus on the solution. So identify criteria. What are the standards for an acceptable solution? So when we're transferring to college, what's the criteria for a college that we want to go to? It has our major, it's in a big city, has big alumni network, it's a public school, so tuition is cheaper, or maybe one private school, so tuition is higher, but the class sizes are much smaller, you know, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I want it to be in a warm weather place, or near the ocean, or near the mountains, or whatever. Number 2, we generate solutions. Which colleges fit this criteria? And then number 3, evaluate solutions. So which ones of these colleges fit the criteria and I can get into, and that I should really think about applying to and doing all the work and paying the money to try and get into the school. So third, we have a discussion management competency. So number 1, you maintain task focus. And I put the example of the ER, the emergency room, where you're always, the ER, all they care about is getting people like keeping them alive. That's what the purpose of the emergency room is. If you have a broken arm, you shouldn't go to the ER. You go to express care or urgent care. Right? ER is like you're going to die. You need to go. You're having an emergency, right? Understand the difference there. So, yeah, maintain task focus. Unfortunately, people go to the ER and don't belong there, and it kind of messes up their task because they're like, you shouldn't be here. Our task is to save lives, right? So because usually if you're stabilized in the ER, they move you to the appropriate medical department, right? Intensive care, or to, like, you know, the MICU, or for the, you know, diseases or whatever it might be, right? So oncology. So and number 2, you manage interaction. So in discussion management competencies, you're always focused on the task. This is what we need to do. This is what we need to do. This is what we need to do. Save lives, save lives. I don't care if you're having you know, an emotional moment. As everybody see, the task is like, are you physically healthy? Emotional moments can lead to physical health problems, by the way. But I'm just saying, like, I've seen people in the ER and they're just having an emotional issue purely, right? You know, they're like, we can't do anything for you in the ER here, unfortunately, right? And number 2, manage interaction again. So they're just trying to get you out, right? We need to manage the interaction. People who need, and they get prioritized. People who are going to die get the doctors first in the ER. If you've ever been to the ER, by the way, if you don't see a doctor, you are not important. You just saw the nurse, a nurse practitioner, PA, but you actually never saw an ER doc. That's because they're only going to the patients who need the medical doctor, emergency doctor, right? So it's all, there's like a little, it's interesting, there's like a panicking order in the ER about who you get to see, right? And if you really, really have an emergency, you'll see an ER doc, right? But if you're not, really, they'll you know, you'll deal with PA, NP, or just the nurse themselves. Relational competencies. So this is where, you know, number 1, you want to manage conflict, and number 2, maintain climate. So number 1, manage conflict is just, yeah. So remember, you can't avoid it, so it's going to happen. So you just make sure the conflict doesn't eat the group alive, and that you solve the conflict, or do what that you can to manage it. Number 2, maintain climate. That's where you made the climate, the feeling that you, when you entered around the team, that it is a climate of supportiveness, or a climate of openness, right? Or a climate of friendliness, or a climate of respect, right? Not a climate where you feel like people are being judged, or a climate of like bullying, or the climate of like people are always being competitive, right? So case study. So page 19 and 20, students in a virtual group, and they're not meeting face-to-face because they're really busy, but their group is struggling. So look at the questions for analysis. Remember the textbook, you should have downloaded it. Check out page 19 and 20, because and you should do this because why? You might see this in a quiz, or you might see this on the final exam. So what would you do if you're in a group? It's a virtual group, just like you're about to be assigned next week, and you're not meeting face-to-face, and you're struggling. But by the way, can you meet with your group mates face-to-face, even though this is an online class? Yeah, absolutely. I had a group this summer session. I think they met at a boba tea place in person, because they realized they all live fairly close to each other, and they all met in person. And I think the first meeting, they just drank boba and got to know each other. They didn't actually try and do anything towards like the actual academics. And that group, by the way, kicked ass. And it's a great example of like you meet face to face. It doesn't have to be all the time, but just even then you work online most of the time. I think you're going to notice that the group members are more committed just by meeting face to face once, because you met people and they're real, right? So what could you do to improve a group that's struggling, right? And that's going to be you probably in a little ways, right? All groups struggle. It's kind of natural in the beginning, and then they emerge from that stronger and better. So what doesn't kill you only makes you stronger. So the theories are things that we don't know are true. Theory is, and it helps us understand communication. You know, do men speak louder than more than women? Do women speak more than women? Or do actions speak louder than words? Those are all theories, right? Things we don't know are necessarily true. We cannot scientifically prove them. So, but we use a lot of theories. And then, by the way, this is chapter 2. Sorry, I should have mentioned that. All right, so we're on to chapter 2, understanding small group communication theory. And I have 20 minutes left. So theory is important because it helps us understand communication. Communication is necessary and inevitable. As human beings, we have to do it in order to be human beings, but it's very complex. And small group communication, SGC, is actually even more complex. So let's dive into 242, social exchange theory. So we're in chapter 2, we're going to apply a bunch of these theories to see if we can help understand communication better, right? So relationships can be described in terms of the rewards and costs, profits and losses. Rewards are pleasurable outcomes associated with particular behaviors. Cost includes things such as mental effort, anxiety, or even embarrassment. So you're in a relationship with somebody, you know, like in a group, and social exchange theory says you're going to look at it in terms of pros, cons, profits and losses, rewards and costs, right? So any of us ever been on a date and you just realize dating, being with this person has pleasures or has more costs, like mental effort, anxiety, or even embarrassment, right? Because you go on this date and they kind of do something embarrassing and you're in the restaurant, you're just like cringeworthy, like, right? So, yeah, the date's over, right? If there's too many costs and too many losses and too many negatives. But if there's positives, you'll try and go on another date with that person, right? Or groups. You join a group and the group is rewarding or it's costly. If the group's costly too much, you'll leave the group or you'll stop hanging out in the group, right? If it's rewarding, you'll be with the group as much as you possibly can. Jobs that are rewarding and pleasurable, you'll stick with. If they cause lots of anxiety and stress, you'll quit. Right. The money is interesting about how much it motivates you to keep with the job, right? But then, you know, the jobs got to have profits and rewards without too many costs. There was one job I was doing last year just as a volunteer kind of thing. And I got paid like $50 an hour. But here's the thing. I had to pay a babysitter to watch my kids so I could go do this job. And I paid her like $20 an hour. So basically I was making $30 an hour. And then I had to drive down there and do all these other things and prepare. And that was like, okay, that's like maybe $10 an hour. So reality, to go do this job, I was getting paid $20 an hour. I was like, this isn't worth it, right? Because you factor in all the other profits and costs and losses and effort. And then you go like, this isn't worth it, right? So that's social exchange theory. And friends are like that too. If a friend has too much cost, you'll dump them and stop being friends with them. If friends cause a lot of pleasurable rewards, you'll try and be around them as much as you can. That's social exchange theory. So do you just look at people as, so sort of like, dollar signs, profits and losses, and that is fair. And it is a way to do it. I think it's a good way, because does anybody want to be in a relationship where you're constantly, has anybody ever had a friend that you have to drive all the time? You have to pay for their meals all the time because they're broke. If you want to go somewhere, you have to take them, right? And you just realize that after a while, you might say, this friendship has a lot of costs and not that much profits. So that will affect the relationship. That's what social exchange theory says. 243, symbolic convergence theory. So we're gonna have a lot of fun with symbolic convergence theory here. And Ernest Borman's the author. So symbolic convergence theory of communication explains how certain types of communication shape a group's identity and culture, which in turn influences other dynamics such as norms, roles, and decision-making. So over time, groups develop a collective consciousness with shared emotions, motives, and meanings. And that creates fantasy. So fantasy is the creative and imaginative shared interpretation of events that fulfills the group's need to make sense of its experience and to anticipate its future. So EDC, is it, I don't know if it's electric or electronic Daisy Carnival or Circus. It's like a fantasy experience for thousands every year. It's in Las Vegas, right? So all these people go to EDC and they all have a group identity and culture. We're like EDCers, you know, like if you go to Burning Man, you're a burner, right? And then this influences the norms in among burners or EDCers, or the roles and how we make decisions, right? And over time, because EDC and Burning Man's like, you know, years old, or many, like Burning Man's 20 years old now or something like that almost. I went in 2006. I want to say it maybe started in 2001, 2002, so it's almost 20 years old. So over 20 years, all the burners have this collective consciousness with all these emotions about going to Burning Man. It was awesome, right? All these motives. I'm there to use drugs, you know, meet people, party my ass off, burn something, you know, indulge in the art, ride my bicycle. And you get all these meanings out of all these things that you do at Burning Man or at EDC, right? So EDC is just this fantasy experience for thousands of people every year. And then every year, people share these stories and these experiences, right? About like, I went partying, I did this, I met that person, this band was the best, or this DJ was the best. And you know, it's all this fantasy that's shared among all these groups. And then other people want to join in the fantasy. I want to go to EDC next year, right? And that's a good example of what we call symbolic convergence theory. So in groups, in almost all forms of human endeavor, we can discern two levels of reality. One, what actually happened, and number two, our interpretations and beliefs about what happens. And that's why we call it a fantasy. That everybody at EDC actually went through what actually happened. But then afterwards, it's kind of what you remember and what you felt and perceived as opposed to actually what happened. That's what creates the symbolic convergence and then causes this fantasy world to exist, right? Where everyone's just sharing their interpretations or beliefs about what actually happened at EDC over the last 10 years. And then this grows and grows and takes on a culture and life identity of its own. And I know somebody who went to EDC this year and they got all these costumes. There's a bunch of girls who got a room in Vegas and they went and they partied their ass off. And they're all like tech workers who make good money and they're all single and they're just, yeah, I was just like, so I kind of, and the reason I was interested was just like, I saw how they got the EDC culture and this fantasy theme that they all buy into and share. And then they share before they go, they share while they're there, and they share a lot afterwards, right? Okay. So a fantasy theme consists of the common or related content of the group's the stories the group tells. So all these girls will tell stories about EDC afterwards, and that's what's creating this fantasy theme about EDC. And they're going to go again next year, right? And they could do this for the, you know, if EDC goes on for a while, I could see these ladies doing it for the next, because I know a lot of ladies that even if you have families and mom, they love doing, you know, all the girls go meet, you know, once a year doing something. It's just a great way to keep, because they remember you enjoy the friendship, the company of these friends, right? So in addition, the fantasy of one group member leads to a fantasy chain, a string of connected stories that revolve around a common theme. These fantasy chains help the group develop a shared sense of identity, just as unique stories and experiences you have with a close friend help give your relationship a unique identity. Usually a fantasy chain includes all the elements you would find in any well-told story. There's some conflict at EDC, we had to get, you know, parking, the cost of tickets, where we were going to sleep, you know, we were bumping into people at the show. They were heroes, these people helped us. The security guard let me in backstage, or villains, that jerk, like, you know, like spilled my drink, or that one dude was harassing me there at EDC, and then a plot, right? This whole story about EDC that gives shape to the story. So let's talk about this case study. And this is important because you may see the case studies again on your final exam or on your quiz. So page 27, 28, chapter 2, how to keep a group on task. So you have a committee, you have a job, right, as a committee to do this. Like you need to throw this PTA event on for the school. That's your task. But some people during the PTA meeting, they're always joking around, they're socializing, they're on their phones, there's no agenda. What do you do? No agenda means there's no structured list of like things we should do in order, right? So what to do? What to do? How do you get the committee on task? And maybe you should create an agenda, right? So that's case study. Chapter 2. So let's talk about structural theory 244. Structuration theory provides a general framework that explains how people structure their groups by making active use of rules and resources, right? So you're in a group and you create some structure within the group by using rules and resources, right? So the theory focuses attention on individual behaviors in groups rather than on the dynamics of the groups per se, right? So let's focus on individual behavior. It is a process theory that says that is especially used for explaining change within groups and organizational systems. So we're going to put some structure on the group. People have different rules and responsibilities, so you can achieve your task. Like, I'm going to do the slideshow, I'm going to do the research, I'll do the video editing, I'll do the outline, right? And you figure out how that all works, and you focus on the individual behaviors, not what the group's producing. And you use rules and resources so that people can follow the structure, right? I'll give you a good example. You ever been to a meeting and there's no structure, right? It's just kind of loose and goose. We're trying to figure it out. Versus you go to the group and they're like, welcoming, let's do this, leader speaks, go through the agenda, questions, town hall, ending, right? And that's a good example of a group that has a lot more structure. You join a team, you know when practice is, where it is, versus you join a team, they're trying to figure out where to practice, when to practice, right? There isn't structure yet. Functional theory is totally different, though. So this one actually looks at effective group problem solving and decision making are most likely to occur. Number one, group members attempt to satisfy task requirements, including understanding the issue to be resolved, the characteristics of acceptable solutions, and what constitutes realistic alternatives, examining those alternatives, and then selecting the alternative most likely to satisfy the requirements of the problem. So number two, group members then use communication to overcome constraints such as stress from deadlines, interpersonal conflict, or self-serving interaction. And then number three, group members take the time to review the process through which they arrived at choices, and if necessary, reconsider their choice, right? So functional theory says the group is there to provide a function, right? To do something, right? So the best way to do that is, number one, what's the task we have at hand, right? Got to figure that out. What's the different? So we have storytelling coming up, right? So you go like, we're in a group now. We have to do this, choose a story to tell. So you think about what are the different stories out there that are acceptable solutions, right? So we come up with maybe 5 or 6 stories that we think are acceptable and realistic, right? Then you examine each of the 5 and 6 and figure out what's the strengths and weaknesses of each one, which one's the best fit for our group, and maybe, like, having 4 or 5 people tell a story. Like, if a story is really short, it's not going to be easy to like tell that with 5 people, because it's really a story for maybe 1 person, right? And then you select the alternative that you think is the best story that fits the group. Then number 2, you communicate with each other to create the story and to alleviate any stress coming from, hey, it's due now, or I don't get along. This one group member and I are having some conflicts, or this person's really, really selfish and won't like help the group, right? They're only going to do what is going to help themselves. And you communicate verbally, non-verbally, through Zoom meetings, through text messaging or whatever, to deal with those. And number 3, you go through the process of deciding the different stories that we decided on, which one, why did we choose on this one? How did it fit? How are we communicating to make sure it all works? And then figure out if maybe we should change the topic, or maybe we should change the way we're doing this, right? And you're reviewing and reconsidering your choice. Just because you've decided as a group you're going to do this doesn't mean you can't change your mind, because sometimes the best decision isn't what comes out first in a group for a variety of reasons, by the way. So all right, so that's functional theory. So we talked about structural theory, 244. We talked about functional theory, 245. And let's now talk about a model of small group communication. And this is where we come up. I have 7 minutes left, 2.5, model of small group communication. So we've got this constellation of variables. So check it out. You have figure 2.1 down here. It represents a descriptive model. This framework depicts small group communication as a constellation of variables. Think about it like a constellation of stars, right? You have a bunch of stars, make a constellation together. Each is related to each other. So you have arrows connecting all of them, right? So each of the variables connects to all other 6 variables as well. And communication establishes and maintains the relationships that makes among these essential variables. That's how they all interconnect the way we communicate. This model thus reflects a systems approach, because the constellation or solar system, many, many parts, approach to group and team communication. So to have small group communication, you have communication going on, right? Verbal, nonverbal, over digital mediums, right? Something like that. So it's in the middle. Then you have the surrounding variables, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You have leadership, goals, norms, cohesiveness, and situation. And all these interrelate to each other, right? So leadership, well, it depends on the situation you're in, how cohesive the group is, what the roles of the group are, and the norms of the group are, and what the individual group goals and are. And individual group goals depend on what the leadership is, and what the style, and how strong it is, and the situation you're dealing with, and how cohesive the group is, and what roles people are playing, and what the norms of the group is. The norms are dependent on the leaders, the individual and group goals. So you see how they're all interconnected, which is why the arrows connect all the different variables. And communications, the way you deal and connect with all these things, right? So you'll see this again. So you definitely want to be on top of the constellation of variables, be able to name all the variables, the 7, and do this diagram, right? The 6 on the outside communication, connecting them all, and that all variables are interconnected with all other variables, which is why you got a diagram like this. All right, situation is connected to cohesiveness, to roles, situation, individual and group goals, leadership. All right, communication. It's what people say, how they say it, to whom they say it. This process is the primary focus of study is in small group communication research. Human communication is how you make sense of the world and share that sense with other people. That was awesome. All right, okay. Leadership is behavior that influences on the group. So leaders influence group members, right, in a lot of different ways. And goals, all groups have goals. A goal may be to provide therapy for members. It could be to complete some designated task, or let's have a fun time. Let's have a good time. Individual groups members also have goals. Individual group members also have their own goals. And then often individual goals complement the group goal. Sometimes, though, they do not. So I'm in the group. My individual goal is not exactly compatible with the group's goals. That's usually why you have problems. So effective teamwork requires shared, clear, specific goals. You're on a team. The team's goal is to win the game. There's one player. They don't care if they win the game or not. They're there to look good individually, selfishly. Does everybody sense that? As long as I don't care about the team, I just need to make sure I look good because I'm trying to get a college scholarship or something like that, right? And I don't care. I'm not really playing for the team. I'm really playing for myself, right? And that's where you'll see that will cause some issues down the road. So effective teamwork requires shared, clear, specific goals. Like let's win the game, right? Everybody, number one goal is let's win the game, right? Norms. They're standards that establish which behaviors are normally permitted or encouraged within the group and which are forbidden or discouraged, right? So what's like normal when you're in the group? What to say, how you act. Like, can you bring coffee to the group meeting? Yeah. Can you bring vodka? No. Should you raise your hand if you want to speak first? That's pretty normal. Should you just interrupt people? That's not normal, right? So every group from your family to the president's cabinet develops and maintains norms. Some norms are formal, such as a rule about when a group must use parliamentary procedure. Formal, explicitly stated norms are like rules that prescribe how group members should behave. You have a dress rule, right? Like everybody needs to wear a suit and a tie, versus you have dress standard. Like that's flexible, right? Other norms are informal, such as the fact that your study group always meets 15 minutes late. Not only do norms guide and direct behavior in groups, they can also be viewed as characteristics of the group that differentiate from other groups. So you're in a group of people, friends. Can you fart in front of your friends? Is that normal? Is that appropriate? Now you're at work and your boss is there. Do you want to just be cutting farts in front of them? Probably not. You see the difference there. What's normal with this group of people is not maybe normal with that group of people, right? When I have to burp around my kids, I always say excuse me afterwards, because they'll always be like, you didn't say. I'll be eating or drinking something. I'll be like burp, and they'll be like, excuse you, right? They'll ever see that. So it's normal for my kids. Someone burps, you always say excuse me. Other when I'm hanging out with some guy friends and we're drinking beer and somebody just goes, you're just like, cool, right? So you just see that that's a good example, right? Like what's kind of a normal behavior in this group of people, and other groups, you may see that those norms change a lot. What's the normal way to greet your friends? Is it a fist bump? Is it shake hands? Is it high five? Is it chest bump? Is it elbow bump? Is it nod? Is it yo, what's up? Right? And you'll notice that every group of people has a slightly different norm for like how you should greet, right? So okay, so I actually worked on a lawsuit once where there was an employee who had a flatulence problem, like a medically related flatulence problem. So they would fart a lot at work, and after a while, coworkers were just they couldn't handle it. It was just disrupting, and they kind of complained, right? I was like, what do you do with an employee? You can't fire them because they have a medical condition. So they ended up putting him in a room, in a cubicle, kind of by himself. So if he farted a lot, you couldn't really smell it or hear it. That's actually, that was the best solution. They kind of like isolated him because it was just, you can't, what do you do? Can't fire the dude, but the coworkers are hella pissed off and annoyed, right? So it's like, yeah, okay.